This is a smaller job there, so I shall quickly greet them and come here. And I'm really very happy to greet you all, and especially we are always happy to see our alumni. You know, our school is existing 39 years, and it was not always here. We came here 25 years ago, but it's always nice to see people who started MBA to study 36 years ago. So greetings to everybody and greetings to the president of the supervisory board and the members of the board and the owners of the school, because we are a private school that has 26, 27 owners and the supporters of the IEDC. I also, of course, would like to greet all the participants from 24 countries. We are this time here, which is quite a big number, and that is also because we have in the school general management program, and there are some people from quite some special countries, so we also, but not because of countries, but because they are great business people and great managers, we invited them here. So, welcome everybody to the 37th Annual President's Forum. You know the former president of Slovenia, Mr. Danilo Türk, who is now president, I don't know whether you know, but he is now president of all, you know, the presidents, former presidents have a group which is called Club de Madrid, and he is now already for some years president of Club de Madrid, so of all the former presidents elected, you know, from in democratic countries. That is kind of, you know, also important data. And he was every year coming to this event, and he said, there are two events during the year that I really may not miss, where I go for sure, and that is United Nations Assembly, and it is Bled School of Management Annual Forum. So this was really nice, and when we had the presidents, they were always here. Now I invited Prime Minister, and he was firstly a long time not saying that he comes. Then some days ago he said, I come. And now again, you know, it became something too many things happened, so he apologized. And also we invited Tanja Fajon, our dear graduate. We are very proud of her. She was studying here, MBA, and she also called me just now. She wanted to come in the second part in the panel, and she just called me with a very broken voice that Eva, you are sitting here in the second place. She was also greeting Roche, you know. So our Minister of Foreign Affairs is also greeting you all, and she apologizes because she could hardly talk. She really became sick, and so she called me personally to show that she really doesn't feel fine. But we have so many, you know, interesting, I mean not many, but we have very interesting speakers, very unique people here, and so many interesting participants that I'm sure we shall, in that competitive Europe, Paradise Lost or a New Drive. You know, we are here really today to have a very interesting discussion. I think this is a very original topic, original theme. I also have a book with me. Do you have it with you here? There it is, you see. This great book was Thomas. His name is not Thomas, but Thomas. And that is the book on Elite Quality Report 24, where 151 countries scores. You know all this IMD Lausanne report. This is another type of the report, and I think, as I said, that it will be a very interesting day today. We select every year an interesting topic. It's not for the first time, but always we try to find something what is really, how shall I say, actual. And of course Europe is actual already for quite some time, and it will stay. And we are striving to create a platform that not only addresses vital topics, but shaping global economies and leadership trends because our school is especially interested in leadership development and developing of responsible leaders. And we have always been at the forefront of nurturing of the next generation of leaders, equipping them not only with the skills to navigate complex business environment, but also with the vision to see beyond the immediate challenges. We have educated so far over 100,000 managers came here in the school in these 39 years from more than 100 countries. We stopped counting now, you know. I mean, we shall look in some time in the computer again. But already 2 years ago, we had more than 100 countries represented. And we, as I said, we continue to our efforts to reinforce our position of a place where leaders come to learn and to reflect. But we are not only happy if they say, oh, I learned a lot. We are very happy if they say, I changed. I reinvented myself. And so, as a part of our commitment to spreading knowledge, we are publishing every year this lecture. It's becoming a lecture of the year, and you will receive it for the New Year present. We send it on 10,000 addresses to our alumni, not all of them, but to last 2-3 years alumni, to participants here, and to many other friends and clients of our school. So I hope you will like it, and that you will not just throw it away, because sometimes people think, oh, again another New Year something came, We shall send you our book. And title of today's forum implies the suggestion of one Europe. And then the question is this a wishful thinking? And I believe it is a perspective, it's an aim. I agree with people who say that further integration and cooperation is a necessity. It is our challenge and responsibility to show that Europe can be successful and democratic on the same time. Because people say, if you have a dictatorship, etc., then everything is very efficient and then it goes quicker and better, but we still hope that democracy and success go hand in hand. Once an undisputed leader in global innovation, industrial prowess, and cultural influence, our continent, Europe, now finds itself falling behind the United States and China in numerous strategic sectors, from advanced manufacturing to artificial intelligence. The signs of competitive decline are all around us, challenging Europe's ability, to drive economic growth and sustain, he will have 10 euros to pay, punishment, to drive economic growth and sustain its influence on the world stage. Can Europe not only catch up, but lead with renewed strength? That's a question. And what are the strategies for that? What are the opportunities and threats? We work in our school in last 10 years on a very interesting research on hidden champions. When we had a dinner last night, I was thinking to ask you, what do you think about, but I didn't succeed. We didn't have time to talk about that. So I decided to mention that. And these hidden champions are relatively small companies, but the most innovative around the world. And the author of this idea is Hermann Simon, the German author who is a friend of our school. He comes often here, and he is always writing the introduction to the book that we publish. And now EBRD is supporting this research. And we are proud of these guys because they are really, we publish now the 3rd book on hidden champions, the most innovative companies in the world. And you will be surprised to hear that Slovenia has like 15 of such companies. Sweden, which is very developed, has 2 per million inhabitants. We have 2 million inhabitants and we have 15 such companies. We were this year, in this year research putting in the book, there will be just 3 of them mentioned. Before that was last time when we published, was also the company of our dear alumnus. Where are you, Mark Pleško? Was his company, Kozilab and some others. But this year 2024 study is Collector, Arctur, and Devesoft. These are the companies that are really hidden champions, and they are, how shall I say, meeting all the standards for that. And so, and they are not so hidden anymore. And that's why when they are not so hidden, then they are champions, not hidden champions anymore, and then we don't write about them anymore. But still, we are very, in that book not, but otherwise, of course. And so, you know, these are the companies that they don't get any support from anybody. Not from the government, not from others. And so what we would like to do with this research, it's not only l'art pour l'art, you know, research for research. We would like to convince the government that they should make some different policies for these companies, that they should help them with marketing, with financing their education, etc., because they are investing only in innovations, and they don't have money for anything else. So we really hope to have some impact concerning that. So I believe that with coordinated effort, investment in education, and a fearless embrace of new technology like artificial intelligence, Europe can redefine its role in the 21st century, setting a new standard for value-driven growth and competitive excellence. Today we have a privilege of hearing from Professor Tomasa Casasa y Kletta. You will be surprised where the gentleman comes from. He is from Catalonia originally. His parents are, when you were small, you left the country. And he is now professor at St. Gallen. And he told me that this E. Kletta means that are mother and father, you know, both names are in that. And E is Croatian and Serbian, you know, E and, so that's very special. You have a very special name for the first time. And we have Tomáš in Slovenia. Tomáš Vuk, where are you? You know, so we say Tomáš, like, not Thomas, like you, like it's your name. And so he will explore the essential ingredients for Europe's renewed competitiveness. He will present the concept of the Elite Quality Index, there is the book, assessment of the sustainable value creation of European organizations, and the general benchmark that the USA and China provide. He will also offer practical insights on areas ranging from the manufacturing industries to AI technology. And the second keynote, Ms. Kerstin Jorna, where are you? Jorna, of course, here. Director General, International Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs at European Commission.
Internal.
Sorry?
Internal market.
Internal market, yes. So it's somebody made a mistake who was retyping my speech, you know, because I know that you are internal market, of course. So she will explore. And more than that, you know. So Jorna will explore the different aspects that need to be boosted to ensure a new drive for European competitiveness and highlight the enabling conditions that are needed to level the playing field of EU industry globally. Soon I shall be ready. In the second part, we will host a roundtable featuring an insightful and dynamic discussion among prominent business leaders from various sectors who will share their perspectives on measures and solutions. We will host Matteo Ferrazzi. Where are you, Matteo? Hello. Him I don't know personally yet, but now we know each other. Matteo, Senior Economist, European Investment Bank. Ms. Nevenka Kržan, President of the Management Board, Luka Koper. We were just talking last night that she is probably the only woman in the world running such a great, port. Is that true? You don't know. We shall make a research on that. Yes, we do it. Archibald Kremser, welcome, from the board member of Nova Ljubljanska Banka Group, and Dinko Lucic, President, and I'm sure that that's you, Mr. Dinko Lucic, President of Management Board at Privredna Banka, Zagreb, Croatia. This is our very good client, and we are very proud of you. After the panel, we invite you for a reception, firstly to talk about and putting the questions and discussion, and then we invite you for a reception and networking. They are upstairs where you had the coffee. So, dear guests, I wish you a very inspiring day. The word, no, I wanted to say at the end, the word new drive is in Slovenian language zagon. And zagon has some meanings, but all fitting today's conference. It means impetus, it means elan, but also the momentum. I hope that we shall all witness that Europe gets a new momentum, a new zagon. And at the end, I would like also to say that you will see, firstly, a lot of good art in the school. But you will also see we have an exposition of lace from Idrija. And this is like being inspired by the painter Klimt. So all that is written here outside. And these little elements in lace, when you look behind this black screen, then you will see the picture of Klimt composed by the pieces of small lace. And when I talk about Idrija, I would like also to mention the president of our management association. Where are you, Istek? There, and you are such a tall guy, and I did not see you before. But Istok and his company is also our owner, and he is also participating at this panel at the end. So welcome. Welcome, thank you very much, and I hope really that you will enjoy this event. And now, Tomas, the floor is yours.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Good. Wonderful. So we're ready to go. It's an honor to be here. I've heard so much about you. It's the first time we are interacting. And you're building bridges. You're connecting Eastern Europe to Western Europe, to Eurasia, to China. And this is going to be one of the main ideas that's going to drive us, right? In Europe, we need to get closer together, but Europe needs to get closer together to the rest of the world, right? We cannot isolate ourselves. Now, what is Europe missing? For the first time, there is a sense of depression in Europe among European elites. We have lost confidence, and the most striking example of that is German elites, right? Germany, where it's political or business or technological elites, are going through a soul searching, a sense of crisis. We have lost any sort of belief in a better future, right? I mean, the era of time is going backwards in Europe, right? Our kids are not going to do as well as we are unless we change, right? Unless we reform. So we're going to analyze this through the perspective of what you have heard earlier, the Elite Quality Index. You can also download it electronically. It's a new theory, a new approach, right? And so what we do is we rank countries on the basis of the value creation of their elite business models. And this is the index over here. We also do it at the micro level. So we also look at companies, and we look at whether the companies create value or transfer value. I'll get into this in a second, right? What do we mean by value creation and value transfer? And you see a lot of theory behind, from Josef Schumpeter, right, to Karl Marx, right? And we're going to look at what it means exactly to be an elite. And we'll start with a little bit of theory. What makes nations rich? What are the richest nations known for? What do they have that poorer nations do not have? You know, good institutions, exactly. You see Douglas North, right? Nobel Prize in economics in 1990. Now Semoglu, Johnson, and Robinson just also won the Nobel Prize. And that's absolutely so. Great institutions. A poor country, miserably poor, like Switzerland, right? I mean, it was so poor in the 60s, 70s. I mean, I'm teaching in Switzerland until the 19th century. You know what the main export of Switzerland was? Sure. Good. They're children, right? Soldiers of fortune. Soldiers, I mean, if you go to Rome today, the papal guard, right? They're still, right? They were so poor because the weather's so bad compared to the fertile plains of France, the Swiss of, I mean, it's just poor. It doesn't have any ports, right? So they were sending their men to fight the wars of the Pope, of the King of France. You know, it was the Wagner country, right? The Wagner group, the group of mercenaries, right? This for 3 centuries, that was Switzerland. And today they're super wealthy, doing super well. Why? Because they have created great institutions. You don't need to have gold, you don't need to have oil, all you need to have is good rules, right? However, the question then that we want to ask ourselves is, who creates the institutions? Where do institutions come from? You know, Max Weber would say they're based on history, they're based on culture. And we say, of course, I mean, and you know where I'm getting at, institutions are the result of elite agency, right? I mean, you will see that now in the US, right? I mean, the institutions of AI will probably be, determined not by the, through a democratic process, but basically by the elites that control AI, right? And there is nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, the fact that the institutional quality, is a result of elite quality, that's the way it is, right? It's a realistic way of understanding human progress and economic development. Because if there's high elite quality, you will have high institutional quality, and you will have human and economic development, right? So this is not a Marxist take on elites. Yes, elites can be exploitative. Yes, elites can exploit workers, as Marx said it. And on the basis of this notion, the whole 20th century changed, right? Because Marx was saying the capitalists are just extractive. Some elites are extractive, other elites create value. Elites in Switzerland create a lot of value, have great rules, and therefore Switzerland is able to be maybe 70-80% as wealthy as their neighboring countries, who are also very wealthy, right? So elites can be good, they create value, sustainable value, or elites can be extractive, and you know many countries where elites are extractive, and this is the key, right? We want to know about whether elites create value or not. But then you may ask me, what are elites, right? What are elites? And elites are not necessarily people, right? Elites, the unit of analysis here is a business model. Just to tell you a little bit more about what elites are, let's look at this video clip over here.
And you have to understand, Sheldon, that while your math is theoretically correct, we don't have the technical capability to execute it.
So I'm ahead of my time.
Well, it would appear so.
All right, call me when you catch up. I can go now.
For the first time, SpaceX has successfully landed its Falcon 9 rocket on a drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean. SpaceX founder Elon Musk called the event an incredible milestone in the history of space.
Elon, the CNN reporter should talk to you.
Hang on. Is that event?
So now you know how Elon Musk, right, came up with the Falcon rocket, right? He stole it from Sheldon, right? What an evil guy. What an evil guy, right? Now, what are elites, right? Elites in the abstract are coordination capacity. Why is able, a person from the outside like Elon Musk to create a rocket? And this is 8 years ago, right? I mean, you just saw what he just did, right? Picking up a booster with chopsticks. I mean, this is incredible, right? So why is he able to do that and NASA or ESA are not, right? NASA and ESA have something that we all know. They have government budget from the greatest states in the world. They have a great history. They have a lot of resources, but they don't have the coordination capacity that Elon Musk has, right? Elites, if you're an elite, you have coordination capacity. In the abstract, elites have coordination capacity, meaning, in economic terms, that they have lower transaction costs, right? Now, they achieve that in various ways. If you look at this here, right, this is a promotional video of Elon Musk, right? So he's very good at coordinating with the media, with Hollywood. But that's not key for the Falcon rocket. What is the key coordination capacity you need to launch a rocket into space and make sure it comes down intact? Well, what's the key technology here, by the way? It's definitely not hardware. NASA is very good at doing hardware, right? It's obviously software, right? Exactly. It's all software, right? And NASA doesn't have the ability to coordinate with software engineers to the degree that Elon Musk can. Right? So he's better at coordinating with software engineers, with marketing, with sales, right? So at the end of the day, we don't look at Elon Musk, right? We look at the business model of Elon Musk, SpaceX, right? So coordination capacity is essential, and it's also coordination capacity that's going to be used to influence the political process, right? Because when elites have their business model, that business model needs to be institutionalized, needs to be protected. So elite business models are the unit of analysis. We don't look at Elon Musk, we look at SpaceX separately from X, separately from Tesla, right? And this is very important. And without elites, you have no economic development. Humanity advances, from the Neolithic, right, to the present, through the agency of elites, right? And this is very important. Non-elites do not matter, right? And this sounds terrible, doesn't it, right? And afterwards I'll advocate for more democracy in the EU, but not for the sake of the non-elites having a say, but for the sake of intra-elite contests being more vital, being more vibrant, right? Because what changes society is when different elites compete with each other, and the ones with higher levels of value creation emerge, right? And this is extremely important. This is an example of Silicon Valley. How did Silicon Valley get started, right? Some people will say, well, it's the Hewlett-Packard garage, right? Some people say, no, it's Fairchild and Intel and the semiconductor industry that powered, right? Whatever, right? The American hardware industry in the 50s and the 60s. And this is all wrong. Silicon Valley starts scaling and starts massively allocating investment to high-risk, high-return projects after the Prudent Man rule in 1979, ERISA, after they were able to tap into the huge pools of institutional capital, right, into pension funds, for instance. Just a very small change in the law allows those, they always existed, but they didn't scale, right? In Europe, we still haven't figured that out. In Europe, we still haven't figured out how to get venture capital, into the hands of entrepreneurs through an elite business model, right? So my students, when they start a company in Switzerland, they may very easy to get 2 million, very easy to get 10 million. If you try to get $100 million or 100 million euros, it's very, very hard, right? You may move to Berlin, but eventually you have to go to London, and eventually you go to Silicon Valley. Our elites are not able to coordinate ideas, technology, capital, sales, the software architect. This is all happening in Silicon Valley, right? So in Europe, we just don't have that coordination capacity, just like NASA doesn't have the coordination capacity to bring a rocket down after it has shot it up, right? Now, elites, you have elites that grow the pie, they create value, right? Like the example now of SpaceX, but there is elites that do not create value, right? That basically appropriate the value that they themselves have not created, right? And this is very important. So this is a very simple explanation, understanding of socioeconomic relationships. Value gets created, and it's either appropriated by the people who create the value or by people who do not create the value, right? Everything is a business model. Inflation is a business model, right? Inflation is probably the reason why, one of the most important reason why Trump won the election. And inflation, if it persists, will change a lot of things in Europe, because inflation is horrible for the lower and middle classes. Those who don't, for us it's great. I mean, the more inflation, the better, because we own stocks, we own homes, right? But those who don't own assets and depend, paycheck to paycheck, which is 60% of Americans, inflation makes them poorer for no reason. They haven't done anything wrong. All there is a transfer of value, right? From those who, it's a change of prices which transfers value from asset holders to those who depend on income, right? So when you look at the economy, if you look at the war, right, is war value creation or value transfer? Who wins and who loses, right? Technology, et cetera, AI, So we can look at everything in those terms. Do we grow the pie, right? Elites benefit from a pie that grows. So good elites are great for the country, right? Those would be the elites that Marx criticized, but Marx said all elites are like that. No, that's not true. There's elites who create value and drive progress and drive humanity forward. So this is very important. Now, you may want to ask, what is value creation and what is value transfer? Since Trump got elected and he's talking about tariffs, right? He has to repeat the word 3 times so that the Europeans get the message. The Chinese already knew about this, right? And the Chinese are well prepared for what's coming now, and they will, it will be very interesting how China reacts to that. We can discuss that later. But if you have, for instance, a tariff of 25% on steel in the United States, what happens to steel prices in the U.S.? Right? They go up by about the same level, right? So a company like U.S. Steel, good friends of Trump, they benefited from the steel. All of a sudden, the price goes up. Now, they create great value by producing steel, but that extra tariff that is put on top of imports from abroad, this is pure profits for them. So they haven't created any value whatsoever on that. But what has happened is that they have made more profits. So where do those profits come from when there is a tariff? Where do those profits come from? Who gets extracted in the case of trade, right? According to David Ricardo, I mean, this is right from the consumers who pay more for that. From Ford, who pays more for steel. From somebody who likes to drink beer because beer kegs are made out of steel, and that's part of the cost of beer, right? So when the EU imposes tariffs on EVs, who's going to pay up, right? When Trump imposes tariffs on everything, who's going to pay? Anything that goes against free trade is a tax on everybody except those who benefit from the, So there's other things, right? Like corruption or interest rates below equilibrium, et cetera, right? So one has to analyze the economy on the basis of this simple duality. Is value being created or is value being transferred? Because if there's transfers of value, that in itself is not sustainable in the long term, right? So let's hold that thought as we continue. I'm not going to go into much detail, but when we look at the book the second book that I brought for Danica here we look at companies, right? And we use the same, this is basically a transition mechanism between the micro and the macro. We rate here companies, and basically what we do is we say, you generate a lot of revenue, right? You appropriate value. How much of it is because of value transfer in? How much of it is because of tariffs, because of subsidies, right? Which is another form of transfers. Because of corruption in some cases, right? And how, and then we come up with a ratio here, but at the same time, we also talk about transfer out in the sense that, for instance, BioNTech, what a wonderful company. I wish Germany, Europe had more companies like that. BioNTech, they got 400 million euros from the German government. So this is extraction from the German taxpayer. But you know what? They more than made up for that because they generate 40 billion, worth of revenue, worth of sale, right? For each dollar or each euro the Europeans invest, you get 100% return. In other words, this is not black and white, right? We're not saying that value transfers are always evil and bad and extractive and they're going to lead to economic regression. Some transfers are necessary for investments, right? And for a better future. Now, here we have the whole idea of the index. We have the political dimension, the economic dimension. We look at power, we look at value, right? We look at the, so we organize all the indicators, 146 indicators, and we rate countries. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I will, because this is a multidisciplinary work, and one of the most important things that we need to understand is the idea of power, right? What is power, right? It comes from sociology, and power is essential for elites. Elites, as a result of their coordination capacity and lower transaction cost, have power over the stakeholders, right? Think of the principal stakeholder model, right, which we always use in management. Your principal, who are your stakeholders, your taxpayers, your customers, right? Your suppliers, the government, etc., the bankers, etc., right? So how much power do you have is essential because power is future value, potential value extraction. If you don't have power, you cannot appropriate the value you do not create. Only if you have power can you extract from others, right? So basically what we're saying here is when we look at the index, right, and we look at the example of Singapore, who is number one, who has the best elites in the world, right? When we look at, according to the 146 indicators, I mean, it can all be criticized, but I think we all know Singapore, and we're not that surprised by that. But what we realize here is that Singaporean elites are very powerful because we measure power, and then we measure value. They're number one in creating value, but they're very, very powerful, right? So, in other words, power can be used to extract, but it doesn't have to use for extract. So elites do have a choice, right? It's good to amass power, but do you use it to create value or do you use it to extract? So in Singapore, it's a very interesting example because elites use their higher endowments of power to basically create value rather than extract, right? If you look at, for instance, other places, the United States, it's the opposite, right? The United States is doing, again, the higher you rank in power, the less powerful you are, right? Because we penalize power. The more power you have, the lower you're going to look at, you're going to, rank over here. So basically, in terms of power, what we are saying is in America, despite of everything, right, the elites compete a lot. Institutions are great. There's many things that work in the United States. But in terms of value, you will see that the U.S. government adds very little value, right? The U.S. government is 75. They cannot get a high-speed, a train running from Boston to Washington, D.C. via Philadelphia and New York, which is something they've been talking for like 50 years now, and it's so needed. And they have this Amtrak that is falling to pieces, right? If you go to China, sorry? Acela, yes. I mean, it's, yeah. And they would need, it would be a great business model. It would be a great business model, and it's, but then, you need basically government that's able to add value. And then you see economic value, and you'll be surprised, 14, right? Because we're going to talk how they have great, amazing companies, right? Like Amazon or Google, and they're inventing the future, but they also have Boeing, right? Compare Boeing to Airbus. Airbus is so much better in so many respects, right? And then you have the flyover country. You have the small and medium enterprises, which are so good and so strong. You talked about the hidden champions. They're wonderful in Germany, also in France, in Slovenia, no less, right? I mean, you have a lot of, and this is absolutely fantastic. Compared to America, we have much stronger SMEs. So America is sort of polarized, not only politically, but also in the economic scene, where you have very strong companies and companies that are not doing so well, right? Companies that are struggling. Now, this index should be able, if the theory is correct, to predict the future events, right? And here, this is when we launched it in 2023, where we had the data, in 2022, where we had the data of 2021. And one of the things we saw when we compared China and Russia is something really striking. Russia, in terms of political power, at 112, right? So the index was already telling us that this is completely out of balance. This is completely out of whack, right? I mean, somebody in Russia had amassed all the political power, and this power concentration is not good, right? And especially when you compare it to other indices. Interesting enough, China is only at 60. Don't think that China is a monolith, right? And not only that, right? Despite having one communist party, it's a very complex system, has many layers, many levels, and there's a lot of competition. Even if there's one emperor, below, there's a lot of checks and balances that we don't even realize in the West, because they don't follow Madison's U.S. Constitution, checks and balances, or Montesquieu's separation of powers. They have their own way of dealing with separation of powers, which very often eludes us. What I want to emphasize is, despite of the high power concentration in the political sphere in China, which is lower, of course, than the Russian one, you still have a lot of market dynamism in China. So there's no concentration of market power. Chinese markets are ultra competitive, are much freer than Western markets, despite state-owned enterprises that distort so many things, including the allocation of capital. But the most surprising thing is that the political value. Remember, I showed you political value in the U.S. In the 70s. The Chinese do create political value, right? And we can go into details. Again, we don't use Chinese data for that. We use only Western data to establish the amount of political value. So we're not going to go into details. Just tell you that if this is right, what's coming here, and this is a regression of all the countries in terms of the elite, quality country score and the GDP per capita, and you see India and China over here that are below the regression line. Whether the regression should be linear or we should, that's a technical issue, but conceptually, what does that mean? That the elite quality of India and China is higher than the current GDP per capita on a purchasing power parity basis. What could that mean? Or what does it mean if this is correct, right? That India and China, on account of the sustainable value creation of their elites, will grow in the future, right? That China has an elite quality index that's very similar to France or Italy, but a GDP per capita that's only a third of those countries. If this is right, if this is correct, China on that, and India, of course, will go, right? So we're trying to look at the future by looking at the elites, and very soon we're going to apply this to the European Union. And here we're starting to take the first chart. There will be many charts now coming from the Draghi report, which is an amazing report. All of you should read it. It's done so well and curated. It has data you cannot find anywhere else. And it compares Europe with China and the US mainly. But just to finish the idea of elites, if you want development, you need to have elite circulation. This is an idea of Vilfredo Pareto, and what it means, elite circulation, of course, Pareto thought of people moving and circulating and changing and going up and down, but basically we look at it from a different perspective, from the perspective of the elite business model. And here you see, right, the greatest innovators in Europe and in the US, and you see 2003 in the US you have Ford, Pfizer, GM, and in 2022 you have Alphabet, Meta, and Microsoft. But if you look at Europe, you will have the car companies, Volkswagen, Siemens, Mercedes, Volkswagen, Mercedes, Bosch, again, and here again, right? And this is basically Draghi's report saying that. Who were the elites after World War II in Germany, for instance? Right? The most important, the engine of, right? If Germany falls, we all fall, right? Germany, I think, is not going to grow this year and maybe not going to grow next year, right? So the implications are tremendous. But who were the elites in Germany after World War II in the 50s? So the industry, the car industry. Who are the elites today? Car industry, nothing has changed. No elite circulation. Pareto would be so angry, right? He says, of course Europe is not doing well because elites are not circulating, right? And this has to do, this is the biggest failure of the EU. The inability to, not only to have European-wide elites, as we will discuss it, but the inability to circulate. What has happened in America? Yes, General Motors was number one in the 50s. If General Motors gets sick, America, fails, right? I mean, that's sort of the very well known. But then they had the big IT&Ts or ATTs, the big conglomerates, and then America went to, it had the big oil, right? And then they had Wall Street, another very powerful elite. The great thing that's happening in America now is that Wall Street, who emerged after 2008, it became very clear how the Obama administration dealt with the fallout of 2008, who is really, who are really the elites in the US, but they're being replaced by big tech. I mean, basically, yes, there's some Wall Street guys, that supported Trump, but you see, that in America, elites circulate to a degree, so elite business models, right? I mean, the Rockefellers have also invested in Trump, right? Sorry, not in Trump, in Musk. So the Rockefellers have invested in Musk, right? So it's not about replacing people, right? It's about replacing business models, right? And if you're wealthy, well, your business model may go down, but you may use your wealth to encourage a new business model to emerge. This is not what Volkswagen has done, right? And this is the problem we have in Europe. And when I say Volkswagen, I use it, in general. What are we going to do now? We're going to look at the painful symptoms, right, that the Draghi reports and others uncover. We will then tell you different causes, right? That we will be critical on the reports in the sense they're very good at the diagnosis, but the Europeans do not understand what is hitting us, right? So we're going to speculate a little bit, and then we're going to propose some solutions. So the first thing, again, those three reports are, basically a manifestation that things are not going well. So the three reports have been issued this year. You have the letter report, right? We'll discuss this, and of course, NISTRO report, right, which is more political and military. But here you see some things already very clear, right? You see the value creation here, of the big tech companies in the US, and then you see the telecom companies in Europe. Well, I mean, again, it's as interesting to look at the value creation of the newcomers as it is, compared to the United States, to look at the European telco companies being 41% less than the American telco companies, right? So it's not only that we don't have new industries, but it's that the fact that our existing industries in some cases are not creating as much value than rivals in other places, right? And look at this here, China, right? We thought that China was about cheap labor. It's not. It's about cheap robots, right? China is about cheap robots, and they're running out of people, right? They're having a demographic crisis, as we all know. But in a way, they're not worrying as much as we worry about them because of the demographic crisis. They themselves are going to say robots. Algorithms are going to replace people. There's one problem, though, with robots, and that is that they don't consume. So there's an aggregate problem with the automatization. Sorry? That's an advantage, but that sometimes, but they don't consume, right? So you look at this here, and then you look at the clean technology capacity. Again, all this from the Draghi report, right? So it's sounding the alarm bell. Something is happening, and just to give you an idea of what the Chinese do, I mean, in terms of innovation, they're really doing cool things. It's just amazing when you go to those Chinese companies, what they do. I mean, there's hundreds of experiments running like this, right? Do you know how many SDVs are there in China? How many SDVs there are, approximately? Again, I'm not saying EVs, right? EVs is completely wrong, right? This is how Elon Musk fooled the Europeans, right? With a false flag, right? And Europeans fell for it, right? Like children, right? There's no such a thing as an electric vehicle. There's a software-designed vehicle. Tesla is basically an iPhone with wheels that moves, right? The key is the software. Europeans haven't figured that out. Now they're figuring it out, right? And now when they're figuring it out, they realize we don't have a software platform, but in basically in China, you have companies like this, right, who are producing all sorts of experiments. Look at this car, because I'm trying to make a point here that may not be immediately apparent. But you see what this car does, right? Can you imagine driving this car here and going into the lake? Right? Would any of you want to buy this car? Right? Absolutely not. It's nonsense. Right? But this is what makes China so great. They're like children, full of nonsense. They're doing things that are silly. But how many SDV companies do you have in China doing silly things? How many? Any guess? How many SDV companies do we have in China? Hundreds, right? 150, 200, right? So you know, everybody comes up with their own things, and eventually they're innovation. They're creating an ecosystem which is just amazing, right? And as a result, again, this is one of the most shocking things that summarizes everything in the Draghi report. The annual growth rate, right, of productivity is well below that of the United States, right, and other advanced economies. But not only that, that's not only the only problem that Nistro or Draghi or Letta are telling us. Energy prices are going up, right? I don't have to tell you this. I mean, this is in the report. But what I want to tell you is the implications of energy prices, right? And here we have another luminary from America, right? Some of you know Mark Andreessen, right? Amazing venture capitalist, Netscape founder, etc., right? He's also pretty much a Trump supporter. But look at his vision.
The only prospect for rebuilding U.S. manufacturing is advanced manufacturing. The only potential is to climb the tech stack and build new kinds of factories that are fully robotic and fully AI enabled, and where they're extremely advanced, sophisticated systems. I think there's a path here. You might almost call this like sort of like an Operation Warp Speed for manufacturing, where you just basically lean hard into this and you say, look, we're going to be America will once again be the #1 manufacturing company in the world, but not because we are opposed to automation or robotics or AI, but precisely because we're going to embrace all of this new technology as hard as we possibly can.
So why is there a chance for America to be #1 in manufacturing? Right? According to him, and we don't know if this vision will come to pass or not, or whether it will just fizzle away, like so many visions by those visionaries. But the key here is that they have basically cheap intelligence. They have an intelligence advantage, right? But this intelligence advantage makes sense, especially in the case of advanced manufacturing, if it's coupled with cheap energy. So high energy prices in Europe are gonna make it very difficult to basically go into advanced manufacturing. You need both. You need cheap intelligence factories, right? And again, remember, intelligence is going to replace electricity. You still need electricity, obviously. But intelligence is going to be that which is going to move everything, from cars to robots, right? We are just not producing intelligence, right? We don't even own our own data, right? Can you imagine the Saudis at the beginning of last century giving all their oil away for free to whoever? Right? This is what we're doing with our data, right? Now, the European Union is very much concerned about privacy, right? But what about the value creation that this data generates? Is this being addressed? Where is the value creation? Basically, you convert data into intelligence, right? So Americans get the oil, our data, and sell it back to us very expensively, increasingly more expensively, right? And this is gonna change everything, right? People talk about data colonialism. The more intelligent species or the more intelligent organization is going to win. And are they going to be in Europe? That's the big question. Having said that, Europe has done some amazing things, and the most important thing, the most amazing achievement, is the single market. Right? It's just without the single market in Europe, we would be in a completely different and much worse a situation. So it's thanks to the single market. It's not yet finished. The whole process needs to be still powered up, right? And Kerstin here, we have to all thank her, because basically the institutional arrangements that you're creating are allowing us to trade, to increase efficiencies. Without the single market, things would be very different. And it needs to be protected day after day, right? Why? Because the local elites of the national states are going to try to free ride it, are going to try, right? So it's very, very important that we have this. So there's two things, right, that we achieved in Europe: the single market, but at the same time, Europe is also peaceful. What I want to emphasize, though, is again the importance here, right, of the single market, and the fact that it's an institution from which we all benefit, and we should every day when we wake up as a business person be truly grateful for this institutional arrangement. But of course, more needs to be done, and you can look at into more detail in the letter report what the suggestions are, and always the sense of urgency. The time to act is now, right? The time to act is now. Maybe we'll hear a little bit more about this. And let me show you another guy, Sam Altman, and talking to some Indian elites. See what he says about the chances of India catching up with America, right? But while you look at this, think about the chances of Europe catching up with America.
We've got a very vibrant startup ecosystem in India. Specifically focused on AI, are there spaces where you see, let's say, a startup from India building, you can build on the models, be it ChatGPT and many others. But if you want to build foundational models, how should we think about that? Where is it that a team from India, 3 super smart engineers with, not 100 million, but let's say 10 million, could actually build something truly substantial?
Look, the way this works is we're going to tell you it's totally hopeless to compete with us on 3D foundation models. You shouldn't try, and it's your job to try anyway. And I believe both of those things. I think it is pretty hopeless, but
right. It's not only hopeless for India; it's also hopeless for. Is it hopeless for us? Can we ever produce intelligence to the degree that the Americans are? How much does it cost to build, those data centers with 30,000 GPUs? Elon Musk in Minnesota, 100,000 GPUs. Do you know what it means to connect 100,000 GPUs and synchronize them at the millisecond? The cabling, the mathematical problem of solving the cabling so that it doesn't heat, so that current circle. I mean, this is incredible, and he's going to figure it out. And we, right? So some things are going to be very, very, very tough, right? Now, given the situation, sometimes when I see this picture, right, and they're great, they're friendly, I talked about the single market, how important it is, but the sense I have, right, I mean, the new commissioners are being now confirmed, and so it's the previous, group, if you will, but it reminds me of those guys over here, right? They don't know what's coming, but they don't understand. They have a lack of real understanding of what Sam Altman just told them, what Mark Andreessen just said about the importance of, cheap energy and cheap intelligence combining for new business models, right? The Chinese understand it. The Indians understand it, right? They're intellectually more sophisticated than we are, right? And this is, something that, do you know this guy? Right? Trump is postmodernist, but I also will claim that the European Union is also postmodern, right? I mean, here look at the different DGs, right? I mean, great. Tech sovereignty, security, and democracy. Democracy and tech sovereignty. All right. I mean, that's all interesting. Commissioner for Preparedness. Here we have preparedness again. Equality needs, right? I mean, if you're trying to build an organization, 27 commissioners with overlapping type of responsibilities, is this not a little bit postmodern, right? I mean, I like simplification a lot. But will it happen or not? And you know what? Europe has, things have changed, right? 100 years ago, look where Europe was, right? Europe was all over. Germany in the 19th century was the Silicon Valley of the world in machine building. Just now the standards of AI, this is the Deutsche Industrienorm, right? The DIN, which are still being used today. So the Germans created standards. The German elites created value for the Europeans, the French, the British, right? And it showed, right? I mean, this obviously is not good. This is European colonialism, but Europeans were powerful. And then something happened, right? And it's World War I and World War II. And World War I didn't start so far away from where we are right now, right? And people still think that there is World War I and World War II, and there is actually only one war, right? That started in 1914 and ended up in 1945. And if you read Graham Allison, The Thucydides Trap, right? You know who is fighting against whom, and the results were very positive, and we're very happy, very, very happy actually with the outcome. But I want to emphasize that there is another perspective in terms of looking at the military conflict that happened in the 20th century, because World War I didn't end in 1945. I will claim that World War I ended in 1956, right, with the Suez Canal conflict. I don't think any of you was born there, right? But the Suez Canal is where, it was French and British property. Colonel Nasser of Egypt tries to take it, and the French and the British attack Egypt, right? What happened there? I mean, they were about to defeat the Egyptians, but then a call came from Washington and said, sorry, British and French, did you really think you won World War II? We won it, right? You need to understand that you have lost sovereignty in Europe, right? You need to understand that. What is sovereignty? Sovereignty is the ability to declare war and peace. In Europe, we don't have the ability to declare war and peace. We lost sovereignty. It started 1914, it ended in 1956, and it became clear to the British and the French, who had thought they were on the winning side of World War II, that they themselves cannot declare war or declare peace. What happened in the 20th century, power in the geopolitical sense shifted from the old world to the new world, to the Western Hemisphere. And this is perfectly fine. There is nothing wrong with this, right? Very often we look at NATO protecting the European Union, and this is good, right? And this is nice, but we don't realize, right, that NATO, right, is basically, I mean, you have the Americans and you have NATO, and NATO here, right? It's Americans we have to be thankful for peace in Europe, right? If there was no, this is realist theory, right, of international relations, because you have a superpower like the United States deeply embedded in Europe, and thanks to that, we have peace. So when we talk about strategic autonomy in Europe, maybe Zizek, right, Slavoj Zizek, is correct, right? This is postmodernism, to think that we, who are not sovereign, who are not able to declare war and peace, could have strategic, right? I mean, it's unreal, right? If the war, the horrible war, right, the war of invasion against Ukraine, if that comes to an end, is it going to be negotiated in Europe, or is it going to be negotiated in the United States, right? Even Turkey has more strategic autonomy than we have in Europe. And there's nothing wrong with this. The Americans are our friends, right? And they look, they have their own interests, but we, so the alternative would be of us taking care of our security. We would make such a mess out of this, right? The French and the Germans, the pillar of the European Union, so great their friendship, but they would not be able to agree on anything. And if you put the Polish and the Germans together, my God, forget it, right? They're not going to agree on anything. Really, it's especially when it comes to military affairs, right? And not only that, having 27 separate militaries doesn't work in military terms, right? And at the same time, right? So you have all those fears, that what would happen again if the Americans come away, right? And you see strategic autonomy. Are you familiar with the Sofagate? We let ourselves be humiliated in such a way. If I was von der Leyen, I would leave the room right away. And Michel would leave the room right away. Well, Michel is worse, right? Because he kept on sitting, What is he doing? Where is our European pride, right? We're being humiliated in public. And again, it's very clear. And of course, and you see the internet, right? please put a headscarf and serve some tea. This is horrible, how we are being, excuse me, this is how the rest looks at Europe. This is how the Chinese look at Europe. Can you imagine doing that to a Chinese government official? If the Turks do that to a Chinese government official, what the reaction would be, right? We have no power, right? And then you have Josep Borrell, right, who's Catalan, and he goes to Beijing and says, geopolitical power, Borrell calls on China to treat EU as a geopolitical power on its own right. Slavoj Žižek would love it, right? You don't ask for power. The moment you beg for power, you don't have it, right? And you're not going to get it, right? You either have it or you don't. You project it or you don't, right? So this is the whole thing about strategic autonomy. Let the Americans manage our security, and if we have bad luck and somebody like Trump comes and makes some mistakes, so be it, right? But we don't have the capabilities of doing it. We could, if we had a European president, if we had a single European military, yes, but not with the existing institutional arrangement, right? And then, however, in the EU, when you go, you hear a lot about, look at this, Commissioner for Trade and Economic Security. You know what this means, Commissioner for Trade and Economic Security? It means Commissioner for Trade and no trade. Economic security is about trade barriers, right? Now, there's other things, right? Before I told you the analysis, the diagnosis that the three reports made, now I'm telling you, I'm giving you a different perspective, right? And I got inspired by you here, a school with a view. So I'm providing you a different view of things, right? Hopefully provocative too. But look at the European Commission, right? Who, 95% of the proposals introduced by the European Commission, and there's a very long process, that there's public hearings, there's many things, but 95% become law, right? In America, when a bill gets introduced into Congress, it's about 3 to 5% that become law, because there's an actual discussion. In Europe, it's the European Commission who decides, and here is in one area where we're better than the Chinese. The National People's Congress of China only passes 90% of the bills. 95%, right? Here, this is an idea of how democratic we are. How much debate there is in Parliament. Switzerland would be very, very different, right? And there's something, I don't know if it's true or not, but there is the idea of a bubble, the Brussels bubble. Again, I was 2 weeks ago in Brussels. Everybody's talking about the bubble, right? But what worries me is the lack of enthusiasm, the lack of confidence of business elites and even political elites, right? We know we are sort of losing momentum. So I look forward so much, Kerstin, and I know I make it very difficult for you, to
make it easy for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, right. But we want debate, right? This is the values of exchange. But hopefully, what we need is new energy. What we need is new culture, and it needs to come from the top. It needs to come from high officials such as yourself. So you are going to be an inspiration for us, right? Anyway, we can go into more details, right? But I will not go into more details. I just want to emphasize two things here. That when Europe has European-level elites, we do very, very well. Second to none. Airbus is just incredible. But Airbus is not, unlike the car industry, where you have French elites and German elites and Italian elites, Airbus is truly European. Whenever you have truly European elites, right, and the European civil servants are also truly European, we can do very well. We just need more of those. We just need more of those, right, rather than less. And that's why, by the way, this idea of the Draghi report is that we need $800 billion. Keep on speaking of dollars. This is terrible, right? I'm a patriotic European, and I should be, So that says something, right, about many things. So you have $800 billion, right, euros again, that are being. But is this going to solve, right? It worked with Airbus. Right, there was a lot of subsidies and state funding, but did it work or did it not work? Right, And the example that very often people in the EU use is look at the United States with the CHIPS Act. What happened with the CHIPS Act? Or the IRA, huge subsidies in semiconductors and industrialization, and then this public money had a multiplier effect, and then all of a sudden you see that investment goes up. Not only, so we are hoping that in Europe, these subsidies will also help us catch up, reindustrialize. The difference is, the difference between Europe and you may agree with this, you may not agree with this, but the difference is, can a company like Northvolt, right? Our great hope for batteries, very expensive project, can it really make it? I hope it can make it, but if you look at the reader comments in the Financial Times, for instance, they're not that hopeful, right? And the problem here is, what's the difference between China and the US? I would claim that the big advantage of America is visionary leaders, visionary elites who can create value. And the great advantage of China, they have less of the visionary elites, but they have something that even America doesn't have to that degree, which is ecosystems. Very vibrant ecosystems, right? So the Chinese economic model of ecosystems, whether it's EVs or batteries, or yes, the state plays a role, but it's top down and bottom up at the same time, right? So it's quite unique. We hope, right, that this great company from Croatia, right, will make it, and maybe if there is state funds invested, that Rimac will be one of the top EV companies in the world. They, as you told me yesterday, they produce the best, fastest cars, fastest SDVs on the market, right? So this is important. The problem here is how this is going to be funded, right? And this is going to be funded with debt. It started during COVID, the next generation, right? Funds, which some people think it's great, but you don't seem to think it's great. No. Remember we talk about transfers? It's an intergenerational transfers. And when I was at the commission 2 weeks ago, and this was introduced, so I said, why do you call it next generation? Is it because the next generation is going to pay for that? And they didn't like the question. But anyway, so getting, you have to be very, very careful. The U.S. is different, right? The U.S. dollar has an advantage. They can get indebted to a degree that we cannot in Europe, right? In any case, do we have enough business people? I mean, you look at R&D intensity, and you look at the EU, right? And I mean, it's not a pretty picture. In other words, if you give money, but you don't have the ability to absorb and create more value with this money, how good are all the subsidies? And we look at the finance industry, right? We look at again, this is from the Draghi report. I never cease prizing it because it's so interesting. But you look what happened, right? In terms of here, securitization, which is very important in the finance industry. It's very creative. It's innovative. And Americans, immediately recovered, and in Europe we never recovered, right? You look at venture capital investment, right? So do we have the business people, the business elites at the other end of government debt and government spending and Keynesian stimulus measures to make sure that in Hayekian terms this is not a malinvestment, right? That this is not just sending good money after bad, so that the next generations will be further impoverished and inflation increases. If the money is invested in value creation, it's fine. I'm all for it. But that's a big if, right? And you don't seem that convinced here. Last thing, right? Again, in the report, right? It's about the competitiveness of Europe. It's the future of Europe. We talk about security 454 times, but AI gets only mentioned 6 times, right? If you do a word count, it's, yes. I mean, and again, security is not something that should concern us. We outsource it to the Americans, and they do a much better job than we do. Why do we try to do things? And there may be different opinions, and that's the purpose of this, right? And I know it's going to be great, right? And I'm just going to. We want debate. We want to. I'm deliberately provocative in order to make it interesting for you. The people of Europe, right? I mean, you have the European Constitution, we the people of Europe. How democratic are we really, right, when we have to go through intermediate? We see, again, 95% of the law proposed. I mean, yes, the parliament is there, but it's not a, it's not a direct democracy. We don't elect a European president. Without a European president, there is no way Europe can come out of it. You need a strong executive. Because look what you have now. You have super capable EU officials. You compare, maybe except for security, but in every other area, the EU officials are as good or better than the Americans and the Chinese, for sure, right? But look at, sorry? They're too expensive? No, they're cheap, believe me. We could increase their salaries, maybe double them. I believe in the Singapore model. You save so much money if you have good government officials, right? So, but anyway, that's a personal opinion. It's very difficult compared to U.S. federal agencies. They report to one branch of government, right? They have broader mandates. They can exert influence. We are sort of in a maze in Europe, and it's very hard. The idea of accountability is a very diffuse one in the European Union, right? So yes, we have, the European Union, and that's important. It should not be called the European Union. It should be called the European Club, right? And the club of what? Who are the members of the club? The nation states. The nation states. Even though the Constitution says we the people, in reality, or we the people of the European Union, in reality, it is the nation states, right? At the same time, you also have, and this is necessary, we need a European bureaucracy, and we have that, the European civil servants. So this is a plus. This is a plus, and it needs to be strengthened in many regards, but it also needs to be accountable to the European citizen, to the European people, right? So just a summary, and I'll finish, right? We are too small for the big problems. We are too small for the European Union as it's configured right now. Too small for the big problems like geopolitics or AI, and then it's too big, right, for the large problems. I'm just going to give you a very simple example. When I tell my German students, and it's painful for them, I say, listen, if Bavaria was an independent country, would it be as rich as Switzerland or not? And absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. And now they're 40% poorer. So Germany is creating diseconomies of scale if we use economics, right? The national state in many countries. France is even worse, right? Spain, I don't want to talk about Spain, right? There's Italy, there's different places. So the Europe of regions is the key. The European of regions is the key. And I'm not going to go into AI, but I'm just gonna have one more thought, right? I think I have 5 more minutes, and I'll okay, thank you. But yes, I'll. Okay, we'll have a 5-minute break after. Okay, I'm exhausting you so much. I'm sorry for draining you emotionally with those news. But two more thoughts. One thought is about Germany. Germany is the engine of Europe. The German, the Rhine Valley, the German ecosystems. It's without Germany, Europe would not have the industrial strength and the industrial wherewithal. But Germany is failing. Germany is falling. And some of the problems are self-made, right? You can only blame the Germans for being non-strategic, right? Germans have never been strategic, right? I mean, Tacitus already wrote about this, right? And we can go through history, and excellent operationally though, right? And they're non-entrepreneurial. If anybody tries to jump ship from a big, I mean, who started TSMC, right? Gordon Chang, he just left the, Intel as a vice president, started this, there's so many people who have this entrepreneurial back, very difficult for German executives to leave their company. You were telling me yesterday something very interesting. I'm not sure you want to repeat it now, but maybe, but maybe you should, right? If you like to.
Okay, yeah. Let's be discreet as possible, but we have a quite interesting interesting company in Germany, and it's interesting to compare culture and habits from managers to employees to other countries where we are.
And in terms of efficiency, I mean, she's European. She's not German. First and foremost, European. Okay. See, then we have a.
For European and German.
I'm also European, but careful.
No, I'm European first. You know, when people in China or Japan or India or Saudi Arabia ask me where are you from, I say no, I'm European, right? I'm European. I think European identity is extremely, extremely important ahead of national identity. Again, if you're in China, but the Germans are not the most efficient. You know, in the group of companies that you were mentioning, for a lot of reasons, right? Again, the German idealism, this idea of moral right and moral wrong, right? Which comes from Kant, if you will, right? And it can be very destructive, right? This Kantian, Hegelian type of, you know, also the analytics, right? I mean, you know, here, what is a Spaltmaß, right? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correct, right? But you see, you see the Germans saying, yeah, okay, this great car from China, but you know what? The door doesn't close as well as ours. German doors, I mean, when Tesla came with its cars, you know, Germans were making fun because, you know, there's 1 millimeter. The Tesla cars, the doors don't close well. Right? I mean, compared to it's perfect. It's wonderful. There's no doors that close better than German car. But it's now not about doors. It's about software, right? Because this car flies because of software, right? I mean, not because of, right? But there is other problems, right, with German. I would say that most of the problems are not, let's put it half-half. They're the paymaster of the EU. Without German money, the EU doesn't work. Hungary behaves, Poland behaves, Spain behaves. Spain is so nice, you know. We go along with everything, but you know, I mean, you know, EU money matters, and you know, I don't know how you are in Slovenia, right? It's very hard to tell if we are true Europeans at the nation state level because we believe in Europe, we believe in the common, or because we believe in our pockets, right? You know, so let's leave it open. But it's the German, you know, can Germany keep on financing this? And when the Eurobonds come, right, basically it's the German taxpayer who's guaranteeing for this. Because if there were bonds issued by Spain, issued by Italy, you would see the spreads would be completely different. It would be completely different, right? So of course we want Eurobonds in Spain, of course, right? Because the Germans are going to vouch for it, right? You know, but Germany has a limit. Germany has a limit. Germany is at a very, you know, so to save Europe, we need to save Germany first, but Germany also needs to save itself, right? I'm not going to go how the Chinese think about their own crisis, but they always think about structural reform and business models, right? You can have it later. I'm just going to, just to lighten things up before I go, you know, I'm going to have a little bit of a, right, a little bit of a song here. And there's a point to all this, right? Creative destruction. Schumpeter came up with it. We need creative destruction in Europe. We need to destroy old structures and new structures. And there's going to be winners and losers. If we are not able to accept losers, right, we are not going to be able to reform. And the winners need to be the new value creators. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm just going to tell you some of the contradictions, right, of the European Union. This is horrible. We are supporting the Ukraine, but we impose tariffs on Ukrainian eggs and sugar, right? I mean, guys, this is just horrible. I mean, this is maddening. You know, I mean, well, I'm not going to say anything else, right? But the hypocrisy, right? Whenever our national interests are at stake, we don't care about the Ukrainians anymore, right? I mean, we cannot import their eggs and their sugar, my God, right? I mean, what signal is this sending to the world? Do you think the Chinese picked up on that? Do you think the Indians picked up on that? You know, etc., right? So, again, security and prosperity, yes. Sovereignty, forget it. We don't have sovereignty. Let's not pretend we have it, right? Because the nation states have some sovereignty, but not enough to declare war and peace. And this is great. This is great, but this depends on America. Let's focus on prosperity in Europe, right? Because our prosperity is now at stake. And let's remember one thing, that if the world developed since the 90s, right? Here you see the GDP of the world in the 90s. It's not because of Europeans, right? You can only, yes, Europe has a contribution, but the reasons for development is US-driven innovation, Chinese supply chains. If you go to China and you see all the huge investments that the Chinese have made in factories, in ecosystems, and all that, you realize the amazing amounts of capital that went into that, and then cheap energy, right? That cheap energy, Russia did some investments there, but the biggest investments in cheap energy is the US fracking, right? Now they produce more energy than Saudi Arabia. I think it's like 12 or 13 million barrels a day, right? So it's just unbelievable. Now, what does it mean that in Europe we have underinvested, not only in R&D, but these investments come from people who are risk takers. The problem in Europe is that we don't take risks. The problem in Europe is we are, not only a club of nation states, but the elites are pretty, I'm going to use a strong word if you don't mind, right? Cowardly, right? Then don't take risks. Elon Musk, you may love or you may hate him, but he has faced death in the eye, right? His companies were about to go bankrupt. He still invests. He could have gone bankrupt. Those people, those elites, are made from a different kind of wood, right? They have a strength, the ability to take risks. In Europe, we have banished risk from our elite system. And without risk, there is no return. When you talk to the European Union officials, and this time I'm sure it will be different, but it's always about managing risk. No, it's about creating risk. You need to create risk. It's basic in finance. High risk, high returns, right? But of course, productive risk, right? So risk is part of value creation. And what's important here is you have seen this, right? You have seen the chart. Germany is going the way of Japan. And you know what happened in Japan. The reason I want to warn about this, right? Because Japan, since 1989, at the peak of the Nikkei index, has for 35 years been in stagnation. It has basically not grown, right? In Europe, we are starting to enter this tunnel, but we have a different culture than the Japanese. In Europe, if we stagnate for 5 years, you're going to have fascist parties again in Germany, in France, and in other places. So it's very, very important that we get it right, because the Japanese are going to say, hi, wakarimashita, right? The Germans are not, right? The French are not, the Spanish are not, right? So it's the whole order we have built since World War II, this stability, we have to create growth again. Our elite business models cannot transfer too much from our people, because our people, Trump will be a small thing compared to the European version of it. So we have to be careful, right? And there is hope, right? Because look at this. If you look at Switzerland, right? I mean, you look at here, the sharks, right? But if you look at Switzerland, it's doing better than the United States, right? So it's possible for Europeans to do well. And Swiss and the European Union should learn from Switzerland, right? And again, Switzerland is something, and this is now really the last slide here, and I'm going to use a French philosopher. His name is Frédéric Manent, right? Pierre Manent. And Pierre Manent talks about the great things of Europe and about the European political systems of thought, and the fact that Western civilization has produced the polis, which is Switzerland, right? And has produced empire, right? In order for Europe to be strong in the future, we need both Aristotle and Augustus, right? We need a strong European Union, a stronger European Union. We need an empire. We cannot be a supranational organization in a world where you have empires, the American empire and the Chinese empires. even the Turkic, the Turks are thinking in imperial terms, right? The Indians, India, with all its diversity, is coming up. And India, by the way, will be more interesting to manage than China, right? India will look at its own national interest. I mean, they're the biggest profiteers, right, from the war in Ukraine. You saw Narendra Modi, bear hug with President Putin, right? How they were, right? I mean, God, the relationship is good. Everything from diamonds, right, from Siberia to oil and gas, and so again, those empires have a certain logic, and it's the logic of power. We need to increase power on the other hand, but on the other hand, we need to lower. I mean, we give more power to the lower levels. And by the lower levels, I mean the polis, right? Which is sort of the ecosystems, right? So if you look at here, right, basically it's the bottom-up value creators that are being sort of squeezed out by the national state. But again, we don't have enough imperial ability. So if we are able to manage empire plus polis in Europe, Europe could be at the same level of China or the United States, and the challenges that Draghi is so well laying out, we will master them. But this is at least a 20 to 30 year project, and we need to know where we're going. And again, I hope that, I mean, some of you are elites, some of you are thinkers, some of you are value creators in academia. So I think that together, maybe we can build a Europe that's able to prevail in the world and benefit the generation that comes after that. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I suggest that we have now 5 minutes stretch break. Is that okay? But don't go for coffee now, because this will come afterwards. Just 5 minutes. And we Hello, hello, yes. It works. Can we please continue? Sit down. Okay. Are we ready now? So, I'm sure that some people have pertinent questions for interesting answers, but I would suggest that now our second guest, Mrs. Kerstin Jorna, is coming here and giving her view on the topic of a very interesting, challenging topic of today, and then we shall certainly have some time at the end to put the questions to both speakers and both lecturers. So thank you very much for coming here. I was so lucky, every year Bled has Bled Strategic Forum, and there we met, and I was inviting Kerstin, and she was ready immediately. She was not necessary to convince her too much, and I really appreciate that, and thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Dear Danica, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to be here. And that before I set out to tell my story of Paradise Lost or New Drive, I want to say 3 spontaneous remarks in response to what Thomas said. My first is a question. Who do you think produced 3 billion vaccines against COVID? China, the US, or Europe? Europe. How did they do it with this governance structure? We pulled it off from 20 million. First of all, we invented the thing. Secondly, we pulled together the money which no government could afford at that moment to invest in the very early stage of these vaccines. None of these vaccines, we bought 7, none of them had actually been totally validated for use. We invested at that stage where no government money and no private money, for that matter, would walk in. We pulled it off. And then we pulled off not only that we chose amongst 173 kind of offers we had, the 6 right ones, or the 5 right ones, we also managed to increase the production, and I say that to the businessmen in this room, from 20 million doses a month to 300 million doses a month within 5 months. So you can imagine, try to do that in your companies. My second question is, what's the difference between the 2 pictures you showed? The Commission and, I don't know, some Politburo. Half of the Commission is women. And my third...
There was one in the angle.
Yeah, you see, I didn't even see it because it was so in the angle. And my third is a belief. I believe, and I will tell you the story why after, that Europe is the biggest risk-taking venture that we have currently running. 27 countries putting together their destinies, their security, their economies, their currencies. Show me who's doing that. I think your terms of empires, polis, yesterday. I recommend the book, just recently, 2nd version, published by Eric Klein, about 5 empires that went down in 1177, I think it was, or 1127, before Christ. We hardly know the names anymore. We remember one, or we know one, which is Egypt, but the others we don't even remember. So what Europe is doing is actually trying to transcend and create a new format. Of course, things don't go right. Anybody who's in innovation knows that. Things don't go right. That's innovation principle. You go, you fail, you try again, you fail again, you try again, and eventually you're getting there. Trying this at a continental scale, really, I think that's risk-taking. these are my preliminary reactions to Europe. I start with my presentation. And first of all, I want to say, dear Danica, I mean, really thank you for inviting me. I know you've been on a mission for decades, a mission to train responsible, efficient, innovative, and risk-open business leaders for Europe. And, you know, only looking at the number of successful alumni in this room, I think that pays tribute to you and your, how did you call it? Permanent zagon. Zagon. So, thank you for that. When we talk about Europe, and Bled, I think, is a good example because it's a deep confluence and junction of Central and Eastern Europe and the Western Balkans. And I think the word European Standort as such, I mean, you can really see that here. Today's conference comes at a very timely moment in the wake of last week's US elections, the European Parliament hearings, and the new political cycle that's putting itself into place in Europe at the moment. In these shifting times, we all realize competitiveness has become the crux of the matter. When pondering on your question, Paradise Lost or New Drive, I would incline to a confident yet realistic answer. Yes, Europe's competitiveness can and must benefit from a new drive. Because Europe has what it takes to be a global top investment destination. Because here, investors will be able to reap clean returns for their investments. You think this is now only nice words, in particular after Thomas' presentation, wishful thinking? No, these are facts. And I would like to give you in my presentation, 4 reasons why this is so. I'll quickly summarize them. First of all, let's take the full measure of what the EU means as a political union. 27 countries that unite their economies, their currencies, and their destinies. Secondly, take the single market and all the components that create the business case for investing here and not somewhere else. Thirdly, look at the hard power and the soft power arising from that single market. And fourthly, the anti-fragility properties of Europe's model in co-creating industrial policy, which sets us apart from other international counterparts. Let's look into these arguments one by one. So, reason number 1, the EU is a single market family rather than a club of nations. I'm a long-term admirer of Francesc Prešeren's poems. Because your previous Justice Minister, Mr. Sturm, actually introduced me to them. So, let me quote, "All nations who long and work for that bright day when on earth habitants no war, no strife shall hold its sway." These are words from the Slovenian national anthem. And they are a perfect reminder of where we come from and what our wider purpose is about. Which brings me to my first point on the value of our political union, united in diversity. Our union is first and foremost a collective endeavor to build peace and prosperity for Europe and its people. And probably the greatest political project ever. Who would have thought that the decision of 6 countries in 1952, in a continent ravaged by war, this decision to integrate their coal and steel industries would lead decades later to a single market, European citizenship, or a common currency. In 2004, 15 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the EU extended its promise to 10 new countries and people. An extraordinary demonstration of resilience and adaptability and risk-taking, and of living up to our responsibilities, historical responsibilities. And we're not done yet, because we're talking about the next wave of enlargement. Europe is now the world's largest single market and democratic endeavor with very concrete changes for citizens everywhere in Europe. Take Slovenia. In 20 years, your GDP per capita in current prices has more than doubled. And the economy continues to transform. Slovenia is moving up, and I don't have to tell that to you, moving up the production chain with research and innovation increasing in importance. Probably you trained them all very well. At the same time, with a fourth of the value added generated by industry, Slovenia remains one of the most industrialized countries in the EU. You're a poster child. Nearly 2/3 of Slovenia's trade and goods and services is done with other EU member states. In all this, the single market has been a key facilitator, also boosted by the early adoption of the euro in Slovenia. I still have a little bag with your first coins in 2007. Looking back at the past 30 years, more than a club of nation states, the EU has proven to be the bedrock of a family of member states, willing to share common values and build collective prosperity. Yet, having said that, the last few years have seen the single market facing challenges and fragmentation. In a world of uncertainty, it takes courage to look beyond. Often we react by retracting into our shell, and we saw that with COVID and the border closures. But we've also seen new momentum growing to complete the single market, because there's no alternative to the speed and scale it can give. And I think we need to seize the opportunity. This is exactly the message of the Letta and Draghi reports. And it's not because it's going bad. It's because we want to go forward and we want to improve. Because in our treaties enshrines the principle of ever closer union to forever more prosperity for our citizens. So we have an obligation. The fact that the Commission, that under the upcoming political cycle, the single market will belong to the overarching industrial strategy and prosperity portfolio is not a coincidence. It's a token of the single market's central role in building a competitive industry that will allow Europe and Europeans to remain prosperous. We are already at work to develop by 2025, June 2025 to be precise, a single market strategy to ensure the completion of a robust, simple and modern single market framework, empowering customers and companies alike. Our thinking revolves around 4 axes that are taken from the business case perspective. Make smarter new rules, make existing rules more coherent, implement rules at scale, enforce rules, and remove barriers. That was my first reflection piece about the single market. My second reason to be optimistic is the good business case for investing in Europe. There is one. How do we ensure that the single market remains the foundation and key enabling framework for reinforcing the business case for investing in Europe? Just little fact, Europe is still the biggest foreign direct investment destination in the world. We're not starting from scratch. Europe has been working continuously at a conducive framework for sustainable investments. That's also about risk-taking. Just think that in 2030, EU green investments amounted to 340 billion, a constant growth year on year. And that's not a small number. We can also see that in the field of, in the first half of this year, for the first time in history, half of the electricity in Europe was produced from renewables. Now, it's nice that it's green, but renewable energy is the cheapest you can get. It's cheaper than shale gas. It's cheaper than fossil oil. Even with their well-established logistics, renewable energy, as such, the sun, the wind, is for free. On the manufacturing side, we have champions. EU wind industry has a 35% worldwide market share, and we have important manufacturers of electrolyzers and heat pumps to say a few. But still, we need to continue working to build a strong framework and stable supply of factors of production to support that business case. For example, access to permitting and easier business conditions. The Net Zero Industry Act and the Critical Raw Materials Act clearly show that we can do better on permitting without compromising on high social and environmental standards. In fact, what we introduced is a single a single permitting procedure for licensing operations on clean tech manufacturing and critical raw materials across Europe. So as an investor, you don't have to worry about local rules and how does it fit and long deadlines and black boxes when you don't know when, you will know whether you can invest or not. Stringent set of rules, digital, clear deadlines in months, so you can invest or not. I'll say a word about that. But I mean, we have an EU procedure now on this. For energy intensive industries like steel, permit granting process for decarbonization project can easily take up to 3 years. Fast permitting means critical projects can be deployed in a timely manner, minimizing cost, speeding up production, and reducing uncertainty. The 12-month time frame means that even in the worst-case scenario, when a permit is refused, the investment can still be redirected to a different project. Next to President von der Leyen's political guidelines and mission letters, clearly also reiterate the commitment to cut by 25% the burden created by reporting and by 35% for SMEs. For example, access to energy and infrastructure. Energy-intensive industries are in dire need of affordable and abundant decarbonized energy at the factory gate, 3A. Just think that the energy cost can amount to more than half of production costs for aluminium and steel. EU prices for energy are 2 to 3 times higher than in the US. In 2023, 20 cents per kilowatt hour in the US versus 8 cents per kilowatt hour in the US, 20 in the EU. This makes it clear that we need investments in energy infrastructure to ensure the integration of renewable sources into our energy grids, hydrogen and CO2 infrastructure, transport and storage, network connections, and industrial plants. Concrete steps were already taken with the Fit for 55 package in the Repower EU plan, electricity market design reform, and Aggregate EU, the instruments through which we implemented demand aggregation, pushing down the price, and purchasing of natural gas at European level for around 43 billion cubic meters. That compares to 150 BCM that we consumed before the war in Russia. But we need to accelerate on all these aspects to remain competitive, which is why the political guidelines mention an action plan for affordable energy prices for households and businesses, an electrification action plan, and the extension of aggregate demand mechanisms beyond gas and hydrogen, possibly also for raw materials. Now you may say, words, action, but this is part of elite working, elite trying to put the governance, show the way where to go, and make it transparent to the different participants in these projects. For example, access to inputs and technology. The Critical Raw Materials Act, the first worldwide mining law that is not only about supply, but also on demand, and which has catapulted the EU, although we are not so rich in raw materials, into the club, this time correct word, into the club of the big mining nations. And we are now talking at par with our friends in Canada. I saw someone from there, Australia, the US, Latin America, because they all want to understand how this demand, the off-take dimension, could help actually with securing the supply dimension. So, the Critical Raw Materials Act will support extraction, refining, and recycling of critical raw materials in the European Union and beyond. The first list of strategic projects which benefit from hyper access to hyper-rapid permitting, superhighway to financing, this list will be published in the first quarter of 2025. Moreover, we are putting in place a joint purchasing platform that will aggregate demand and supply for strategic materials. With the Net Zero Industry Act, we've put in place a supportive policy framework to ensure that the EU benefits from the ongoing energy transition by remaining a major producer and innovator in net zero technologies. Semiconductors were mentioned already. The CHIPS Act has generated over 100 billion of planned investments to boost the manufacturing of chips. So all these legislations, they're not about money, they're about projects. They generate projects, and they generate good projects. And these good projects will be able to attract investments in Europe. And I'm not talking about public investment, because most of it will be private investment. We also need, of course, to build the dynamic sparked by these measures to ensure that we create quality jobs in Europe. Of course, we need to avoid regional inequalities, ensure cohesion, and uphold our climate and social objectives. For example, access to funding. Access to funding is essential for driving transformation. It fuels the development and implementation of cutting-edge solutions. Draghi report highlighted the 800 billion for clean transition only. If I look at the steel industry, we think there's a need of 31 billion of capex and 54 billion of opex, and total cost for the chemical industry to achieve net zero by 2050 is above 1 trillion euro. While it's clear that these needs can only be covered through a full interplay between public and private funding, here again we are not starting from zero. According to most recent data, in 2023, the EU's annual investments in clean energy technologies reached something like 300, almost 400 billion, which is 20% of the global total. China's of $1.8 trillion. China's investment amounted to 680 billion, and the US investment around 300 billion. There's more. The EU was the largest contributor to the growth of global green investments in 2023, with an additional 93 billion euro on year. Looking more closely at our support instruments, we have a number of tools to help mobilize investment and address investment gaps. InvestEU, the Innovation Fund, the European Innovation Council, Horizon Europe, and connecting the dots through our STEP platform. Important projects of common European interest, developed by member states together with the support of the Commission, enable the EU to invest together in the most important value chains. So it's a cluster of projects, not only one project, a whole value chain. 10 of these important projects of common European interest have been approved so far, and they mobilize something like 100 billion between public and private funding. We are now working on this basis on a competitiveness fund, which would again look at the de-risking in the different projects and try to provide an agile kind of top-up cooperation instrument to allow private investment. For example, access to markets. This is a key lever to make sure that the demand side pitches into an overall effort to boost the business case for sustainable investments. A recent example of this can be found in the non-price criteria for public procurement under the Net Zero Industry Act. And I'd also give you another example of how demand can come into play. Demand in downstream sectors provides OPEX for upstream sectors. Take cars and steel. To produce one passenger car, you need an average of, a little ton of steel. In 2023, the EU produced 12 million cars. If we do the math, that means roughly 11 to 12 million tons of steel needed. Add to that the fact that the automotive sector is the number 2 consumer of steel in Europe after construction, accounting for approximately 17% of EU steel consumption. And you will see that the automotive can really drive green steel demand in the EU. Even more so if you consider that according to different estimates, the change in the final cost of producing a vehicle using green steel ranges between 60 euro and 300 euro, so quite marginal compared to the cost of the rest. Nickel is another example. We have a growing demand linked to the production of clean technologies, but most nickel is coming from Indonesia and China and produced at very highly negative environmental cost. And China is out there to really destroy the nickel markets, whether they're in Canada, in Australia, the US, or anywhere else, extraction and refining. The price is going down massively at the moment, so people don't invest. So we are getting together in a G7 format to look at, and maybe Canadian G7 presidency will be able to help work on this piece further to every year. Stainless steel, batteries, defense applications. So if we work together, created this specifically circumscribed market based also on sustainability criteria and resilience criteria, we create a new market that is worth investing in because of the demand that's clearly lined up behind. And we can rely in this time of thinking about lead markets, we can rely on legislation such as eco-design for sustainable products, construction products, or the legislation on the end-of-life vehicles as a help to set these conditions and the labels. This process needs to go hand in hand, of course, with the revision of the Public Procurement Framework Directive, which is also announced in the political guidelines. Because public procurement is one of the main levers, 14% of GDP only, to develop innovative goods and services and create these lead markets. For example, last but not least, we certainly need a business case that also has access to skills and a skilled workforce. Around 70% of businesses report that the lack of the right skills hampers their investment. And the green transition is expected to affect between 35% and 40% of all jobs. A lot has already been done in this domain as well. The Pact for Skills, the European Skills Agenda, which pulls together the workers and the companies, and it's kind of moderated by the public. We've launched 19 large-scale partnerships, providing training to more than 2 million workers. The Net Zero Industry Act and the Critical Raw Materials Act also launch what we call the academies, which is business-driven and university-driven scaling up and skilling up facilities, where you can learn modules that you add to what you already know. And we're aiming for several 100,000 workers. We've already almost trained 100,000 on battery value chain, for example. That takes me to my third reason why Europe can do it. The single market pulls its weight globally. A Slovenian popular wisdom teaches, Kdor redko seje, bo redko džejo. You reap what you sow, in case you didn't understand my Slovenian. So, no, we're not abandoning our conviction that free trade can create added value and ultimately prosperity for all. And we are not underestimating the benefits that have come with it and will still come with it. We're the biggest exporter in the world, which, by the way, is another testimony to the single market, because it's a launch pad. We export 16.5% is our share of exports, which is much higher than that of the US, by the way. But we need to make sure that fairness in our trade relations is also implemented. Because if we don't, the green business case does not have a chance. And that brings me to my third reason. Our companies need a level playing field to make sure that they harvest clean rewards in the single market and beyond. President von der Leyen says, we will continue to deepen our free and fair trade links with growth centers and partners around the world, ensuring reciprocity and a level playing field. On this, the European Economic Security Strategy has already provided a comprehensive compass for action, the 10 critical technologies, and we can see this was strongly reiterated also in the political guidelines. China, you're an expert, is clearly a case in point. We say de-risk, not decouple. De-risk means de-risk excessive dependencies. China represents a very serious economic competitor for the EU. Political guidelines say the more aggressive posture and unfair economic competition from China reflect a shift from cooperation to competition. Chinese industrial overcapacity is growing, especially fast looking forward, looking for export markets rather than satisfying domestic demand. And I think this is really the problem in the Chinese business model. They don't develop their own demand, their own market, which is a great potential. They build and manufacture to skim off other people's markets. One striking example, China's solar cell production capacity totaled 1,000 gigawatts last year. That is more than double the global demand. So you wonder what they need this for. We see price competition on clean tech, overcapacities in steel, massive subsidies. A recent study found that 99% of all listed firms in China have received direct government subsidies in 2022. We also see serious challenges emerging in e-commerce and in certain product categories. Strikingly, the safety gate data show that around 85% of toy-related alerts in the period 2016-2021 concern toys from originating in China. I recommend for Christmas for your children, don't buy toys on the internet. Add to this that the European and Chinese economies have become more and more intertwined during the last decades. In fact, there are mutual dependencies for several, actually more than 100 projects also between China and the EU, both ways. Also we've seen export controls from China on critical raw materials such as graphite, rare earth, metals, or gallium and germanium. And that's the reason why we have the Critical Raw Materials Act now. So much for being able to innovate. And also we've seen the situation of Lithuania when Chinese action led to an 80% decrease in exports from Lithuania to China and challenged the integrity of the single market. But that also is a story about the resilience of the single market, because we managed to actually reboot the supply chains that Lithuania had into China, both from supply side but also from export side, into the single market, most of them. And that was possible in a very short time. Of course, China is a significant trading and investment actor. To take the example of Slovenia, your trade with China is almost 8 billion in 2024. It's a tenth of the value of your national GDP. Our single market is open for business, but on our terms. Those who want to trade here need to do so by our rules. Do you abide by forced labor regulation and show you live up to the standards EU companies need to respect on human rights? Go ahead and trade. Do you abide by the foreign subsidies regulation and show you did not benefit from support that is incompatible with state aid rules? Go ahead. Is your market open to our products? With the agreement on government procurement, the international procurement instrument, and our trade defense instruments, we have the means to say, well, if you're not open, we are not open. And part of this is also the reason behind our increasing application of resilience considerations in our policies. This was codified first in the Critical Raw Materials Act and the Net Zero Industry Act. It also permeates other instruments, more recently for example, the Hydrogen Bank, the second call. The auction will open up on 3 December, will award 1.2 billion to renewable hydrogen producers located in the European Economic Area, and it includes resilience requirements. We will, of course, also pursue partnerships around the globe. This was also the message conveyed by Mrs. von der Leyen. And in the next mandate, the Commission will develop clean tech and investment partnerships to help secure supply of raw materials, clean energy, and clean tech from around the world. I want to say a word on advanced manufacturing because that was mentioned. The EU, I'm happy to say, is ahead of the US, and not a bit. True that China is on the robotics is taking off very much, but the smartest robots still come from Europe, and the integration they manage to do in a kind of process environment, not the little ones I saw in the Park Hotel who bring you your bled cake, but the ones that can actually work in a process environment, integration. Europe is pretty much top, and you can see it also in the number of patents that are being used on this. Last word on the Open to the World. We have 14 partnerships with strategic partnerships on raw materials with resource-rich countries in the world, and they are a new form, a new format for partnership. It's about the business case. It's we bring the offtake and the technology, sometimes the training, sometimes building the roads to actually get the stuff out of the mines, and the resource countries have a stable and reliant and long-term OPEX flow into the CAPEX they need to develop these resources. Very successful partnerships, and in the call I mentioned on critical raw materials, strategic projects, almost 1/3 comes of the projects come actually from these countries. My fourth and last reason is the anti-fragility properties of Europe's collaborative industrial policy making. I believe the values of democracy, of openness and inclusiveness that are at the core of our model are a strong asset for attracting sustainable investment to our continent. And the same can be said for the inclusive approach that we have on industrial policy making. Actually, if you look at the organigram of my team, it's built around ecosystems. Ecosystems. We're always open to learn. And that has been an incredible strength, I have to say, when we had COVID, when we had invasion in Ukraine, when the supply chains were shaking. I see myself looking for noble gas after the steel company was completely destroyed. We found all the elements for the COVID, to produce the COVID vaccines, including stupid things like plastic bioreactor bags. We really managed to pull this together because of our knowledge of the ecosystems and where things were. I want to mention transition pathways, which we built per ecosystem, all the stakeholders. We said, let's get together, private and public stakeholders. Where do we want to be in 2030? And what does it take us to get there? In terms of money, in terms of research, in terms of involvement of cities. The chemical one is the most successful. It has actually been replicated in almost all member states. So we have a European one and then the member states, because it gives predictability, visibility, and you see, if I invest here today, others will do other things, and that kind of builds the value chain for decarbonization. We have industrial alliances, hydrogen, battery, and the battery value chain in Europe. True, we have a current little problem here, but overall this value chain was built from nothing. And if all the projects kind of come on steam as they are planning, we'll build our own batteries. We have 11 of these industrial alliances, including one, we discussed this yesterday, on small modular reactors. And the Critical Raw Materials Act, for example, was born from the Critical Raw Material Alliance. We also have the Industrial Forum, which is a forum with 57 members, where we listen in. And where we need you to also feed this forum in the situation of greatest uncertainty after the war with Ukraine. We met and we exchanged on the sanctions, we exchanged on, and we hope that the members kind of bring that back information to you. When we had the problem with the gas, we needed to think, how do we prioritize, the gas, the little gas over the winter. We used the forum to understand how your production processes were going. We learned, I said it to one person yesterday, we learned that you can never stop a gas factory, because if you do, you throw it away. So that meant we need to prioritize gas for it. So all these discussions is the Industrial Forum. Then we have InvestEU, which is our big guarantee program. We're on track to do 370 billion investment. With your help, currently we have out there the biggest pilot project ever, talking about risk-taking, 5.5 billion for sustainable loans for SMEs, because we see that the transition is really difficult for them, and we want their partner banks, who are partnering with our partner banks to actually be able to have these loans, and that the banks don't tell them, you're not taxonomy, you're not something, and it's too small for me to actually bother. So 5.5 billion out there. Grab it if you need me, but it's the de-risking part. We help our partners to take risks that they otherwise wouldn't take. Because our partners are good partners, we think the projects they will be de-risking will fly, which means there's no need to pay the guarantee sum, and we can use it again. That's the whole idea behind it. And Citibank, I don't know if they're in the room, is one of our partners. Ladies and gentlemen, prosperity and competitiveness will be the first priorities of next Commission. I come to my conclusion. I hope that my presentation has at least given you food for thought that this truth is never black and white. I also think that we need the new drive. It's not a paradise lost. If I can get back to Franciszek Prešerin, if he were here, he would probably quote his own poem, Memento Mori. When time marks its circle around your feet, youthful dreams die in the sunset. Well, Franciszek, I don't think I would agree with you here. I think the EU and the European Union is strong, and we will stay course. We will stay together, and there's a lot of new drive in maybe an even bigger Europe. Thank you.
It's time for a break and for a talk, for coffee break, and lunch is later. But I still think that it would be nice to give a chance to, if you agree, of course, for one or two questions. Yes. I have
a question. Thank you. So thank you, Kerstin and Thomas, for fantastic presentations. Very motivational, very inspiring. And I really agree with both of you. I think, and the reason I agree with both of you, because I think you are not talking exactly about the same thing. You're talking different views. And I think Kerstin was presenting us, the activities that Europe is doing. And Thomas presented us with the results of that. And somehow we see that the activities are really good and really promising, and the results maybe not so good. So then my question to both of you is, what is it that we are missing? Is there something that we are doing wrong, not in terms of policy and economics? Maybe it's the culture, maybe it's something else. But what is it that, all these good activities and good intentions don't give exact the same high value of results?
Can you answer here on this mic?
Well, Europe is not like a state, and it's certainly not like a state like China. So Europe is 27 countries, and we have to factor that in. We're united in diversity, and managing the diversity is complex, but it also is rewarding, and it can bring rewards. Do you think the production we could have pulled off? I mean, the US tried, China tried. They couldn't pull it off. We could pull it off because we had different capacities in different countries. We were able to talk to them, and we were able to build this production chain, irrespective of who these companies were. They all shared their patents. They all opened their laboratories. They prioritized. One stage we had the problem with the little bottles. We didn't have enough of these little bottles where you put the vaccine in. Then, some companies said, okay, I don't do the bottles for whoever other client, I do them now. This is what we managed. So it's easy to say 24 languages, all these borders, all these little governments, but I think take it as an opportunity and as a as an opportunity. And it's true, you know, did the US integrate 12 new countries? Did China integrate any new countries? I mean, we managed. No, but I mean, I gave you the numbers. It was a huge, I mean, ever since the fall of the wall, actually. And we could have said, oh, it's too complicated, we don't do it. But we didn't. And that's why complexity, you know, the diversity and and that's what I call fragility. We're also the first continent, to be honest, that sets out to be continent, to be net zero in 2050. Now, you can say you can contest that ambition or not, but, you know, we all signed it, your government signed it in Paris Agreement, and here we are trying to find the best way to leverage in the best way the scale of the single market, our innovation, our inventiveness, to create these new business models for the future, which will be business models that you will be able to export. Because in the end, as I said, green energy is the cheapest.
To answer your question, I think that the EU is absolutely necessary, is doing a fantastic job, right, starting with the single market. But again, the single market is a characteristic of empires, right? The United States is a single market. China is a single market. So everything we're doing at the US is just to come closer to something that the American empire and that, I'm using empire metaphorically, I hope you don't, right? And that the Chinese empire already have, right? So all the great work of the EU is catching up with institutional arrangement that are already existing in China and India, and it's great. And we should continue this way, and I very much encourage all this, right? But there is still a gap there, right? And that's what the EU is working on so hard at achieving, right? At consolidating the single market and preventing its fragmentation. And then the ecosystem, and you're absolutely right. You're encouraging ecosystems. I'm so happy when you said that you organized around ecosystem, because this is the polis, right? This is the bottom up. If you go the pharma ecosystem in Belgium, right? You go to Vaccinopolis, and you see R&D, the greatest minds in vaccine, and entrepreneurs, in small companies, SMEs, that together build an ecosystem, and this is fantastic. However, despite the fact that we produce all the vaccines, the elite business models of vaccines, the mRNA technology, if you look at Moderna, or you look at BioNTech gave the rights to Pfizer, right? We missed that opportunity to build a $100 billion new pharma company that is going to develop mRNA technology, not only to fight COVID, but to fight cancer. And that's the problem. We have great government officials saving us from a crisis. Maybe some of us are alive today thanks to the work that was done in scaling vaccine production. But we need to create European-level elites, and we need a pharma mRNA that is, through this technology, able to be a leader in the world, right? So again, to summarize, we're on the way to empire. We, in some areas where we can, we have to push harder on that, and the EU is already doing that, but at the same time we need elite business models that are able to scale. We do not scale to the level that Americans and Chinese do. Okay.